Snow hammered the alley. Wind cut sharp. June ran, stumbled knees, scraping Teddy clutched to her chest. Behind her shouts the slam of a door, boots pounding closer. She gasped, veered, pressed into the shadows, body folding behind a rusted dumpster. Breath ragged, hands shaking. She bit her lip to kill the sound. Silence fell. Then footsteps again, heavier, steadier, not rushing, but searching. A tall figure turned the corner coat snapping in the wind. He stopped cold. His gaze locked on the child, bruised, trembling, half hidden in the snow. His heart slammed once, twice, and everything changed. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you silently, arranging everything then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. Denver, Christmas Eve. Snow drifted down in the thick silence, golden street lamps casting halos across empty sidewalks. From the top floor of the Merrick residences, Silas Merrick stood before a wall of glass, watching the city glow like a celebration that no longer belonged to him. Behind him, the penthouse stretched wide and cold. On the coffee table sat a single photo, his late wife, his little girl, caught mid-laughter in a moment forever gone. The silence tonight was unbearable. Silas slipped on his coat, left the frame behind, and stepped out into the winter night. The streets were alive with joy. He could no longer feel families clutching gifts, children pulling sleds, couples laughing as music spilled from shop windows. A saxophone played Silent Night near the park. The case scattered with crumpled bills. Silas passed without stopping, his steps aimless, his gaze hollow. Then he heard it. Not bells, not laughter. A sound sharp and fragile. A child's sob muffled and broken. He froze, heart thudding. For an instant he thought it was a memory, the echo of his own daughter crying out in the dark. But then it came again. He followed quickening down a narrow alley behind St. Mary's Catholic Church. Wind cut through the passage carrying flakes and shadows. There, hunched beside a recycling bin, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. A thin red coat clung to her small frame, its hem soaked through. Her shoes didn't match, one pink, one brown. Knees scraped, legs bruised. In her arms, she clutched a battered teddy missing an ear. Blonde hair stuck out from beneath a knit cap. Her wide glassy eyes fixed on him with raw fear. Silas raised both hands, voice low, steady. It's okay. You're not in trouble. The girl shrank back, hugging the bear tighter. He crouched, careful to keep distance. My name's Silas. Are you hurt? I heard you crying. Her lips trembled. The words came so faint they nearly vanished into the wind. He calls it discipline, but it hurts. The sentence hit Silas like a blade. His throat tightened. Who? He asked softly. Who did this to you? She looked down, silent. Slowly Silas removed his coat and set it on the snow between them. His voice steadied into a promise. Can I give you this? It's warm. I promise. For a long moment she didn't move. Then a small hand reached out, fingers red and raw, and drew the coat around her shoulders. On her wrists faint bruises showed. Her voice cracked but held. My name's Juniper, but everyone calls me June. Silas nodded, emotion rising. Hi, June. He extended his hand, not to take, only to offer. Would you like to come somewhere safe? Snow clung to her lashes as she hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. Silas helped her stand. She was weightless, but her tiny fingers gripped his sleeve, not just out of fear, out of fragile trust. And for the first time in years, Silas felt something stir in his chest. Not chance, not pity, a reason. The elevator hummed as it carried them upward, the city lights falling away beneath. June stood stiffly at Silas's side, his wool coat wrapped around her like a shield. She didn't speak. She didn't look at him. Her small hand never left the sleeve of his jacket, as if letting go might return her to the cold alley where he'd found her. When the elevator doors slid open, the penthouse revealed itself, floor-to-ceiling windows pouring in the Denver skyline, marble floors gleaming beneath recessed light. To Silas, it was familiar, almost sterile. To June, it was a cavern of shadows. Her gaze darted from corner to corner, as if danger could spring from the walls themselves. "You can sit here, if you'd like," Silas said gently, gesturing to the leather couch. June didn't answer. She dropped to the floor instead, crawled beneath the glass coffee table and curled up, knees tucked to her chest. The space was too small, but she folded herself tightly as though invisibility were safer than open air. Silas stood frozen. He had closed deals worth billions spoken before senators commanded entire boardrooms. Yet a bruised child hiding under his table left him utterly unprepared. He moved quietly into the kitchen. What would comfort a 7-year-old who had learned to fear everything milk cocoa? His hands hovered over cupboards before settling on soup, simple, familiar. As the chicken noodle warmed, the clatter of utensils felt like thunder. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting her to run. But June stayed under the table, watching him with eyes too sharp for a child, eyes that measured risk in every move he made. When the bowl was ready, he didn't bring it too close. Instead, he set it gently on the floor near her hiding place and eased himself onto the couch a few feet away. "I made this for you," he said softly. "It's okay. I'm just here." He didn't look at her directly, didn't force eye contact. He waited. For a long moment, nothing. Then a small hand crept out, her sleeve sliding back, just enough to reveal a faint bruise on her wrist. She pulled the bowl toward her, lifted the spoon with shaky fingers, and took a sip. Silas exhaled silently. A bridge had formed, not strong, barely a thread, but a bridge nonetheless. Later, as he moved to hang her damp coat, something stiff in the pocket caught his hand. He pulled out a photo creased and worn from too much handling. In it, a pale woman lay in a hospital bed, smiling faintly, despite the tubes and circles under her eye. A younger June sat beside her, holding a paper star. Love filled the woman's eyes. Love that clung even in weakness. On the back in crayon, Mommy Marigold Ellis. Forever in heaven. Silas's chest tightened. Memories rushed back, his own wife's ragged breath in a hospital room years ago fading like smoke. He hadn't allowed himself to hear it again until now. He reached for his phone. After a long hesitation, he dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Tessa," he said when the line picked up. "Silas, it's Christmas Eve. Are you all right?" The voice of Tessa Calder, a CPS caseworker, was groggy but alert. "Not really," he admitted. "I found a little girl. 7, maybe. Name's Juniper Ellis. She's got bruises. Said someone hurts her and calls it discipline." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Oh no. I know that name. Her mother Marigold passed last year. Since then, she's been with her mother's boyfriend, Colton Vance. He never adopted her, but the court granted temporary care. We've had suspicions, but never enough proof. Well, now I have proof, Silas said firmly. She's here. She's not going back. I'll start the paperwork, Tessa said. But Silas, Colton is slippery. He hides things well. He won't let go easily. Neither will I. His voice was steady, final. Do what you can. I'll handle the rest. When he ended the call, he returned to the living room. June was still under the table, the empty soup bowl beside her. She had fallen asleep, curled around her teddy, one ear, missing one eye, stitched back on with clumsy thread. Not just a toy, a survivor like the girl who held it. Silas crouched down, laying a folded blanket near her without touching her. She stirred, but didn't wake. For the first time in years, he felt something shift within the silence of his home. At 2 a.m, he woke to a soft whimper. June had sat up, eyes glistening, staring at the photo he had left on the counter. She sang me to sleep, June whispered. Even when she was too weak to sit up, even when she had tubes. But when she couldn't sing anymore, he told me crying was weak. He said if I cried, I didn't love her. Silas knelt, heartbreaking. That's not true. Crying doesn't mean you didn't love her. It means you still do. She studied him, eyes wide and searching. Then for the first time she reached forward on her own and touched his sleeve. Silas didn't move, didn't speak. He simply stayed anchored in the fragile moment. And in that silence he understood June didn't need saving. She needed someone who would stay. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Merrick Penthouse, catching dust motes in its golden light. The snow had eased, leaving the city glazed in white. For the first time in years, Silas found himself standing at the stove, sleeves rolled up, staring at a skillet that hissed and smoked. He flipped the pancake clumsily. It landed, half burned, half raw. He frowned. Behind him, a small sound rose, a muffled giggle. Silas turned. June sat on a stool, wrapped in a fleece hoodie, her teddy propped beside her like a breakfast guest. Her lips pressed together, but her eyes betrayed her. Was that a laugh? Silas asked, mock offended. She shrugged, trying to hide the smile tugging at her mouth. Well, he said, setting the ruined pancake on her plate, that's about how I felt cooking it. This time she laughed, a sound light and unguarded, filling the sterile kitchen with something new. Silas froze, letting it sink in. He hadn't heard laughter in these walls for years. When he placed a second attempt, slightly less disastrous, on her plate, June studied him curiously. You don't cook much, do you? He blinked, startled by her first full sentence since the alley. Then he smiled. Not unless you count reheating takeout. They ate quietly, the rhythm companionable. For Silas, it felt almost miraculous. By late morning, he guided her into his car, the heater humming against the cold. Their destination was not another high-rise or store, but a small, modest clinic tucked behind a weathered strip of buildings, South Federal Children's Clinic. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old fabric, cartoon posters peeled from beige walls. It wasn't luxury, but it was steady. Silas had once brought his daughter here after a playground accident. The memory pressed sharp against him as they waited. Dr. Sloane Avery emerged, her grey sweater visible beneath her white coat. Dark curls pinned loosely. Her expression softened at the sight of June. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Sloane. You can call me that if you'd like." June didn't answer. Her eyes darted past her, scanning for traps. In the exam room, Sloane's voice remained steady. "Just a few gentle checks." "Okay. You can stop me any time." June climbed onto the paper-covered table only after Silas nodded encouragingly. Her bear rested on her lap like armor. Hearts beat, reflexes, joints. Sloane was careful slow. But when she lifted the hem of June's shirt, silence swallowed the room. Beneath the fabric, bruises painted her small body, yellowed ones fading, angry red ones fresh. Thin scars traced across her back, some shaped like belt marks, one deep near her hip. June's stiffened shoulders curling inward, chin ducked, bear clutched tighter. Sloane's hands stayed gentle, her voice quiet. "This didn't happen overnight. These are long-term injuries. At least a year, maybe longer." Silas clenched his fists on his knees, knuckles white. He forced himself not to speak, not to rage. His fury could wait. Her truth could not. Outside, Tessa Calder was already waiting with a clipboard. She had been pulled from the holiday leave, her eyes heavy but sharp. "How bad?" she asked quietly. "Worse than you think," Silas replied. Tessa handed him forms. "We can file for emergency guardianship today. But be prepared, Colton Vance won't let this go without a fight. He's slick in court. He knows how to charm a judge." Silas signed without hesitation. He won't get near her again. That afternoon, he tried to give June something lighter. He brought her to Tattered Cover Bookstore, the old corner shop that smelled of dust and paperbacks. Its shelves leaned with age, its windows steamed from the cold. For a child who had known fear more than comfort, it was a pocket of warmth. June wandered through the aisles, trailing her fingers along spines. She paused before the Velveteen Rabbit. Silas bought it without hesitation. They stepped into the crisp air of the parking lot, books in hand. June's small fingers tucked into his coat pocket, her body leaning into his side. For a moment, Silas thought maybe this could hold. Then June froze. Across the street, leaning casually against a black sedan, stood a man in a leather jacket. His grin was smug, his eyes fixed directly on them. Colton Vance. Silas didn't need an introduction. He saw it in June's reaction, the way her grip on his coat turned to iron. Her small body folding inward, breath hitching like a balloon losing air. Colton raised a hand in a mock wave, then tapped 2 fingers to his temple in a mocking salute. Silas moved instantly. He scooped June into his arms and turned his back, striding to the car. She buried her face in his shoulder, trembling. The drive home was silent. That night, as Silas checked the locks and double-checked the security system, unease gnawed at him. June sat on the couch with a blanket colouring quietly, though her lines shook. At 8:37, a sound broke the stillness, a soft scrape at the front door. Silas crossed the room, opened it carefully. The hallway was empty, but on the welcome mat, tucked beneath a damp corner, lay a torn scrap of paper. He unfolded it. "She's mine. You can't save her. No signature." But the jagged scrawl screamed Colton Vance. Silas folded the note, slipped it into his jacket. He didn't show June. He wouldn't. But as he glanced across the room at the small figure wrapped in his coat clutching her bear, he knew the battle was no longer in shadows. It had just stepped into the light. The Merrick Penthouse had never felt so fragile. Snow pressed against the windows, muffling the city in white. Inside, firelight flickered across the walls, soft music hummed low, and for a moment Silas thought he had built a fragile cocoon of safety. June sat curled on the couch with her colouring book, her teddy tucked under her chin. But safety was still only a question mark. She flinched whenever the elevator dinged, her eyes darting toward the door at every distant sound. Silas had promised her he would stay, and he meant it. It happened on the second night. At first just a knock, sharp, deliberate. Silas froze. His instincts screamed. Slowly he crossed the room, checked the security panel. Camera feed, empty hallway. He waited, heart pounding. Then came the voice. "You think you can steal her from me?" The sound slithered through the wood like poison. Colton Vance. June gasped and shrank behind the couch, trembling. Silas pressed the silent panic alarm near the door. Downstairs, security locked the elevators. Police were already on their way. "June," he said, crouching, his voice calm despite the rage in his veins. "Remember what we practiced the safe room. Go now. Lock it." She shook her head, frozen in terror. "I'll come get you," he promised, his hand steady on hers. "You're okay. I'm here." Her legs shook, but she ran. Silas turned back just as the door shook under Colton's fist. A second bang splintered wood, then silence. The silence broke with a crash, the door bursting inward, snow swirling in behind. Colton stormed in, eyes wild, chest heaving, fists clenched. The air stank of whiskey and fury. "You think money makes you her dad?" he snarled. "She's mine." Silas stepped forward, body a shield. His voice was steel. "You didn't raise her. You broke her. That ends tonight." Colton sneered, his grin twisted. "Parenting's discipline. She cries too much. She pays for it. That's how kids learn." "Love isn't punishment," Silas shot back. "And she's not your daughter. Not anymore." Colton lunged. Silas didn't flinch. But before Colton could reach him, the penthouse flooded with movement, 2 uniformed officers barreling through the shattered doorway, weapons raised, police hands where we can see them. Colton roared, swinging wildly before being slammed to the floor. His wrists were cuffed in seconds, his curses echoing off the walls. From the hallway, a small face peeked out, pale and wet with tears. Silas rushed to June, scooping her into his arms, holding her tight as the chaos swirled. She clung to him with all the strength in her tiny frame, sobs breaking free. "It's over," he whispered into her hair, rocking her gently. "He's not coming back." When the officers led Colton away, the door temporarily boarded. The apartment fell into uneasy quiet. Snow blew against the broken frame, flakes scattering across marble like spilled glass. Not long after Tessa Calder arrived, her face pale with fury as she took the notes Silas had saved and the police report now filed. "He violated every condition," she said. "Forced entry threats endangering a minor. This gives us everything we need." Behind her, another woman stepped forward, tall, composed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She extended her hand. "Nora Keaton, child advocacy attorney. Tessa called me." Silas shook it, his grip firm despite exhaustion. "We're going to court," Nora said, her tone calm but unyielding. "And this time we'll bury him legally. Protective order, permanent guardianship. The judge will see the truth." Silas glanced toward the couch where June now slept curled in a blanket, Teddy under her chin, breath uneven but steady. "I don't care how long it takes," he said quietly. "She's mine now, and no one will ever hurt her again." Nora studied him, her sharp expression softening. You really love her, don't you? Silas's gaze didn't waver. I didn't think I could anymore. But yes, I do. Snow fell steadily outside, blanketing Denver in white silence. Inside the broken doorway of his home, Silas knew the battle had shifted. The shadows were over. Now came the fight in the open. And this time, he was ready. The courthouse stood grey and solemn beneath a veil of snow. Steps swept white windows glowing faintly against the winter sky. The city seemed hushed, as though holding its breath. Silas walked up those steps with June's hand tucked firmly in his. She wore a pale blue dress with tiny embroidered stars, her hair braided neatly, her teddy peeking from her backpack. She looked so small against the towering stone, but she didn't falter. Silas felt the squeeze of her fingers, fragile but determined. Inside the courtroom smelled of paper and old wood. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Heavy oak benches faced the raised bench of the judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes softened only by age. At one table sat Colton Vance. His suit pressed his expression smug. He leaned back in his chair as though the courtroom itself bent to him. His attorney, a sleek man with polished shoes, smirked as though this were routine. At the other table, Nora Keaton stood tall, her presence crisp and controlled. Beside her, Silas settled into the seat, June leaning close. The hearing began. Colton's attorney opened with a practiced performance. My client, he said smoothly, has acted as a father figure since the tragic death of Marigold Ellis. He is being unfairly maligned by a wealthy stranger who sees an opportunity for control. The child's injuries, misinterpreted accidents, children fall. They bruise. This case is nothing more than an attack on a grieving man. Colton bowed his head at the word grieving, his lips pursed in mock sorrow. Silas's fists clenched beneath the table. Then Nora rose. Her voice was cool, deliberate. Juniper Ellis lost her mother to cancer. She was left in the care of a man who never legally adopted her. Since then, she has been isolated, belittled, and harmed. What her guardian calls discipline is in fact abuse. We have the medical records, the therapist's report, and tonight you will hear Hannah herself. But before that, she held up a drawing. Gasps stirred across the courtroom. It was a child's picture, a two-story house, smoke curling into hearts, three figures holding hands. Above them a woman drawn in the clouds with stars in her hair. This, Nora said, her voice firm, is what home looks like to a 7-year-old. Not fear, not bruises, but safety, love, stability. And she found it not in Colton Vance's house, but in Silas Merrick's care. The judge studied the drawing for a long time. Silence pressed heavy. Then came the hardest moment. June climbed into the witness chair, her legs too short to touch the floor. She held her teddy tightly, eyes darting to Silas. He gave her the smallest nod, steady grounding. Do you know why you're here today, Hannah? Nora asked gently. June's voice was small but steady. To tell the truth. And why did you run away the night Mr. Merrick found you? She swallowed her gaze, flicking to Colton, then to the judge. Because my mummy was gone. And when I cried, he hit me. The courtroom stilled. Even Colton's grin faltered. Nora stepped closer, careful. And now, do you feel safe? June turned her head, her eyes finding Silas. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He makes it feel like home. For 5 heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. The judge's face softened, her hands folded tightly on the bench. She called a recess. Outside in the corridor, June curled against Silas on a wooden bench, her head resting on his arm. He wrapped both hands around hers, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles. Nora returned from the judge's chambers 30 minutes later, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned, in her voice low. Decision tomorrow. But your daughter made an impression. Silas blinked. Your daughter. Nora gave the faintest smile. You've been calling her that with your eyes since the moment you met. Silas looked down at June, her breath warm against his sleeve. For the first time since that night in the snow, hope felt less like a risk and more like a truth waiting to be spoken aloud. Snow drifted steady outside the courthouse windows, painting Denver in white silence. Inside, the judge returned to the bench, papers stacked neatly before her. The room held its breath. This court has reviewed all documentation, she said. Hospital records, sworn testimony, security footage. Most importantly, we have heard the child's own words found credible and compelling. Effective immediately, permanent guardianship of Juniper Ellis is granted to Silas Merrick. Any temporary care granted to Colton Vance is revoked. A permanent protective order is issued. Adoption may proceed in due course. The gavel fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then June's small voice whispered, "We won." Silas exhaled shaky. "Yes, sweetheart." "We did." She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing, not from fear this time, but from relief. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, as if shielding her from every cruelty that had brought them here. They didn't drive straight back to the penthouse. Instead, Silas turned the car toward the hills. June watched the city fade into trees, the skyline giving way to silence. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. "There's someone I think we should visit," he replied. The cemetery lay blanketed in snow. Quiet, except for wind whispering through the pines. Together, they walked a gentle slope, until a simple stone came into view. Marigold Ellis, beloved mother, fierce and full of light. June knelt before it, her braids stirring in the cold breeze. From her pocket she pulled a folded drawing. A house, bright colours, smiling stick figures. But this one had 4, her mother in the clouds, stars in her hair. "Hi, Mummy," June whispered. "We're okay now." He stayed just like you wanted. Snow swirled, suddenly glittering in the sunlight like confetti. Silas stepped back, giving her space, his chest tight with something like reverence. When June rose, she looked up at him. "Can we come back every Christmas?" everyone he promised. That night, the penthouse no longer felt hollow. Friends gathered: Dr. Sloane, Tessa, Nora. The table was mismatched, the centerpiece handmade by June from pine cones and glitter. They toasted with cocoa instead of wine, laughter soft but real. Later, Silas tucked June into her room, now glowing with fairy lights and drawings taped across the walls. She handed him one more picture before sleep pulled her under a house with 2 figures, inside one tall, one small, both holding cocoa mugs. Above it, a single word written in big loopy letters. Forever. Silas knelt holding the paper like it was gold. "You changed my life," he whispered. Her eyes were already closing, but her smile lingered. "You changed mine first." He kissed her forehead, stood in the doorway, and let himself take it. In the snow outside, the warmth inside, the sound of steady, untroubled breathing. For the first time in years, the silence of his home wasn't heavy, it was peace. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.